I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The meeting was never entered into the official diary. No private secretary waited outside, no advisor carried notes, and no announcement followed. Yet behind a closed door at Windsor Castle, Catherine and Camilla held what would become their final secret conversation. Now, a palace insider has revealed the exchange that shattered their fragile understanding and exposed a struggle over loyalty, influence, and the future shape of the monarchy that neither woman could afford to lose. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine requested the meeting after strained messages, delayed replies, and avoided encounters. Camilla agreed only if no aide remained close enough to hear. The morning room, a private chamber used for discreet royal conversations, became the setting for an exchange neither woman wanted recorded. That absence mattered because the royal household, the staff who manage official and private duties, had no written account to control once the story escaped. Catherine began calmly. She told Camilla that when William assumed greater authority, the Queen Consort's influence over household appointments, private briefings, and family decisions would be sharply reduced. The words were simple. Their meaning was not. William's future reign depended on one clear chain of command, and Catherine believed divided loyalties could weaken him before he wore the crown. Yet she knew she was speaking to the king's wife, a woman who had fought for decades to secure her place beside Charles. Camilla did not interrupt. She kept one hand near her untouched tea and listened as Catherine explained that the change was meant to protect the monarchy from competing centers of power. Then her expression hardened. The Queen asked whether William had sent the princess to deliver the warning. Catherine paused, chose her words carefully, and refused to answer directly. That silence carried more force than any confession. According to the palace insider's documented account, shared after the meeting, Camilla slowly removed her glasses and placed them beside the cup. "Then this is not a conversation, it is a notice," she said. Catherine felt the accusation land, but she did not retreat. Respect for Camilla pulled her one way. Duty to the future king pulled her another. For the first time, firmness won. The leak exposed more than a warning. It revealed that both women had entered the room carrying years of buried resentment, suspicion, and fear over what would happen when Charles's reign finally gave way to William's. To understand why those few words cut so deeply, the story must move beyond royal titles and into the personal fears both women carried through that closed door. To the public, they represented two generations standing beside the same crown. In private, however, Catherine and Camilla occupied positions that could never be entirely comfortable. One had fought for acceptance after years of hostility. The other was being prepared for a future that would eventually replace the present. Their final conversation was therefore not simply between a queen and a princess. It was between a woman protecting what she had gained and another protecting what she would inherit. Camilla had spent years enduring public anger before she finally stood beside Charles with recognized authority. That history made Catherine's warning feel like more than a change in palace procedure. The Queen Consort, the title given to the monarch's wife, heard it as a threat to everything she had survived to achieve. Every reduced briefing, every appointment made without her, and every family decision placed beyond her reach seemed to suggest that acceptance had only been temporary. Catherine carried a different burden. She was not defending personal ambition, she was protecting William, their children, and the stability of the next reign. The future queen knew that one day, every unresolved tension would fall directly onto her husband's shoulders. Yet she also feared how easily firmness could be twisted into cruelty. If she challenged Camilla too openly, she could be portrayed as cold, calculating, and eager to claim a position that was not yet hers. Camilla watched her carefully. She admired Catherine's discipline, restraint, and growing popularity. But those same qualities disturbed her. They proved that public affection was already moving toward William and his wife. The monarchy appeared to be preparing emotionally for a younger couple, even while Charles still carried the crown. That shift made the Queen feel as though the institution was applauding her in public, while quietly preparing to move past her in private. The insider's documented account later revealed that Camilla had noticed something else. Senior aides had begun seeking Catherine's approval before bringing delicate family matters to her. No formal order had been announced, yet the pattern was clear. Influence was moving before authority officially changed hands. Camilla finally leaned forward and asked whether Catherine expected her to disappear gracefully. The words were controlled, but the humiliation beneath them was unmistakable. Catherine paused, folded her hands tightly in her lap, and said she was asking for cooperation, not disappearance. She wanted a transition without rivalry, not a punishment disguised as reform. That careful answer failed to calm Camilla. She believed the request had been triggered by one particular incident the palace had tried to bury, and she was no longer willing to pretend it had meant nothing. And behind Camilla's wounded question stood a single ceremony, a broken agreement, and the moment their uneasy trust finally reached its point of no return. The final secret talk did not begin with an argument at Windsor. Its true beginning came 3 months earlier, during a royal reception that was supposed to display unity. Before the guests arrived, a quiet dispute unfolded over who would greet foreign dignitaries, who would stand beside the king, and whose office would approve the final order. It lasted less than 10 minutes, but for Catherine and Camilla, that brief confrontation became the moment every unspoken rivalry suddenly felt real. Camilla had always led during Charles's official engagements, while Catherine's office controlled arrangements involving William and the younger family. Their households had followed that informal understanding for years. A royal household means the team of aides and officials who organize a senior royal's duties, staff, and private schedule. Nothing had been written down. Everything depended on courtesy, restraint, and each woman recognizing where the other's authority began. That fragile balance broke at a Commonwealth reception inside Buckingham Palace. The event brought representatives from nations linked through the Commonwealth, a voluntary association of countries connected by shared history and cooperation. Minutes before the guests arrived, Camilla personally changed the receiving line, the formal order in which royals welcome visitors, and moved Catherine behind 2 senior guests without consulting her office. Catherine discovered the alteration as an aide handed her the amended program. She read the new order twice. Her face remained controlled, but the insult felt unmistakable. The future queen believed the change diminished her position beside William and weakened the message of continuity the reception was meant to send. Still, she refused to challenge Camilla in front of waiting staff. She folded the program, returned it quietly, and entered without protest. Camilla saw that silence differently. She believed she was enforcing rank and protecting Charles's authority at his own engagement. When Catherine said nothing, the queen did not see restraint. She saw concealed defiance. The calm expression, the measured steps, and the refusal to question her decision convinced her that the princess would carry the grievance straight to William. William noticed the change after the reception. He studied the amended program, drew a hard line through the altered order with a black pen, and instructed his staff that no future arrangement involving Catherine could be changed without written approval. The prince viewed the order as protection, not retaliation. His wife had asked him not to escalate the matter, but he believed silence would invite the same humiliation again. According to the insider's documented account, Camilla later learned of William's instruction through a senior courtier. She immediately concluded that Catherine had complained behind closed doors. From that moment, every delayed reply and avoided encounter appeared to confirm betrayal. When the 2 women finally entered the morning room, Camilla was not waiting for an explanation. She was waiting to discover whether Catherine would admit she had chosen William's side. That buried accusation followed them into Windsor, where courtesy lasted only minutes before the conversation became the confrontation both had spent months avoiding. For the first few minutes, both women spoke in the controlled language of duty. Catherine referred to continuity. Camilla spoke of experience. Neither raised her voice. Then the queen abandoned the careful phrases and asked the question that changed the meeting. "Did you ask William to remove me?" What followed was not a polished royal exchange. It was a deeply personal confrontation between 2 women who believed the other had quietly crossed an unforgivable line. Catherine sat opposite Camilla at a small table, The door shut, and both security teams dismissed beyond immediate earshot. The silence around them made every pause feel dangerous. She explained that William wanted clearer boundaries before taking on more duties from Charles, especially over appointments, private briefings, and decisions involving the Wales children. Those boundaries meant fixed limits on who could advise, approve, or interfere. And they mattered, because the future king could not inherit a divided household. Camilla heard something colder. She accused Catherine of presenting a family takeover as administrative reform. Every new rule seemed to remove one more piece of her standing, while every promise of continuity appeared to prepare the palace for life without her. The Queen said she had spent years supporting Charles, absorbing hostility, and protecting his position. Now she was being asked to accept a future in which her experience counted for nothing. Catherine did not retreat. She said confusion had already damaged trust between the households, and that William could not begin his reign surrounded by competing personal loyalties. The princess insisted she was not trying to erase Camilla, but she refused to pretend that affection for the king could determine authority after the crown passed to his son. Camilla's next words changed everything. She revealed that she had seen a confidential transition framework listing Catherine as William's primary private advisor while leaving the Queen out of future family councils. A transition framework is a private plan defining how roles, access, and decision-making would change when a new monarch took power. Catherine's face shifted at once. Her shock was genuine. Someone had shown Camilla a document she was never meant to see. Camilla pushed her chair back and stood beside the fireplace. She demanded to know whether years beside Charles entitled her to nothing once William took control. The question carried anger, but beneath it was fear. Catherine watched her carefully, then answered in a voice so calm it sounded final. This was no longer about entitlement, she said. It was about who could be trusted with the transition. That word, trusted, shifted the conflict away from emotion and toward the hidden machinery, deciding who would hold real power inside the next reign. Royal power does not always announce itself through crowns, ceremonies, or public decrees. Often, it lives in smaller privileges. Who receives a briefing first? Who recommends an appointment? Who enters a room before a decision is made? Catherine understood that invisible structure. Camilla had learned to survive within it. Their dispute became dangerous because both women knew the same truth. The person controlling access could influence the monarchy long before the sovereign publicly spoke. Charles remained sovereign, but William had already begun taking greater responsibility for long-term planning, staffing structures, and the future direction of the institution. A sovereign is the reigning monarch who holds the crown's formal authority. The prince was not replacing his father, yet every new duty moved him closer to the moment when the palace would answer to him. That made unresolved boundaries more than a family problem. They were a threat to the next reign. Catherine's influence came from trust, consistency, and her place beside the heir. Camilla's authority came from her marriage to the king and the access that position gave her. Neither woman held power in the same way, but both understood how quickly a private recommendation could become an official decision. The Queen feared losing that access. The future Queen feared inheriting a system where personal loyalties remained stronger than clear responsibility. William worried most about the cost to Catherine. If the boundaries stayed blurred, she would be forced into repeated private battles after he inherited the crown. The future king could already see the pattern. One disputed appointment, one withheld briefing, one family decision challenged behind closed doors. Each conflict would place his wife against his father's widow, turning every choice into a test of loyalty. Charles felt the danger from the opposite side. He remained fiercely protective of Camilla and resented any plan that treated her like a temporary figure waiting to be removed. Yet the monarch also knew the next reign needed independence. That truth hurt, because protecting his wife and preparing his son were no longer the same task. According to the transition group's confidential written recommendations, automatic consultation rights would end for every member of the current royal household after succession. A transition group is a small team preparing how duties and authority will pass to the next monarch. The framework did not target Camilla alone, but once she saw it, every omission felt personal. Charles later read a summary in his study and placed it face down on the desk. He said nothing. The silence lasted long enough for his private secretary to understand that the king was not merely angry, he was deeply wounded. Before Charles could intervene, the Windsor confrontation ended abruptly. Camilla had already decided that she would not quietly accept what Catherine had delivered. By the time the morning room door opened, Camilla had already chosen how she would answer Catherine's warning, and her response would be felt throughout both households. The conversation did not end with reconciliation, an embrace, or even a formal agreement. It ended when Camilla picked up her handbag, left her tea untouched, and told Catherine that she would not participate in planning her own disappearance. Moments later, the Queen walked through Windsor's private corridor without acknowledging the aides waiting nearby. Behind her, Catherine remained alone in the room, knowing the warning had been delivered, but fearing the cost had only begun. Camilla left well before the scheduled end of the meeting and cancelled a joint briefing planned with Catherine's household later that afternoon. A joint briefing is a private meeting where two royal teams coordinate duties, messages, and future decisions. Its sudden cancellation told the waiting staff that this was not a minor disagreement. Within hours, routine papers that had once moved between both offices began traveling separately through the King's team and the Prince of Wales's staff. Catherine felt the accusation more deeply than she expected. She had entered the room believing she could prevent a harsher confrontation later, when William held greater authority, and every boundary would carry the force of the crown. Instead, Camilla had heard only rejection. The princess now feared that an attempt to protect the future had made her appear eager to erase the present. Camilla returned to her private rooms carrying a different wound. She felt betrayed by Catherine, but the deeper pain belonged to Charles. The Queen could not understand how transition plans had advanced so far without the king defending her position more forcefully. She had stood beside him through years of public hostility. Now, in her mind, he had allowed a system to prepare for her removal while she was still fulfilling her duties. Camilla summoned one trusted aide and gave a precise instruction. She wanted the names of everyone who had drafted the confidential framework and the person who had authorized Catherine to discuss it. The framework, a private plan for transferring roles and influence to a future reign, was never meant to reach her directly. Yet someone had placed it in her hands, and she intended to discover why. Catherine immediately telephoned William. She told him the meeting had failed, and warned that the divide between the households was now serious. The prince asked what had caused the sudden collapse, but she withheld one crucial detail. Camilla had seen the document. That silence protected nothing. It only gave the hidden source more time. Catherine ended the call and returned to the untouched tea service. She lifted Camilla's cup as though weighing what remained unsaid, then placed it back in exactly the same position. The fallout seemed ready to divide the family completely. Then an unexpected encounter stripped away the titles, offices, and advisors separating the two women. The turning point would not come from Charles, William, or any palace committee. It would come when Catherine and Camilla met again, with no plan, no witnesses, and nowhere left to hide. Their second encounter was not arranged by secretaries. It carried no agenda, and produced no formal record. 2 days after Windsor, Catherine found Camilla alone in a small sitting room, following a family dinner. For once, neither woman began with rank, policy, or succession. Camilla spoke first, not as queen, but as a wife terrified of losing her place when her husband's reign ended. Catherine listened, not as future queen, but as a woman who understood what public judgment could take away. Catherine had entered only to collect a folder left behind after dinner. Charles and William were elsewhere, and no advisors stood between the two women. Camilla sat with the transition document beside her, the private plan explaining how roles and authority would shift when the crown passed to the next monarch. The princess stopped at the doorway. Something in the queen's silence made leaving feel impossible. Camilla admitted that her anger had never been only about briefings or appointments. She feared that once Charles's reign ended, every sacrifice she had made would be rewritten as an embarrassment the monarchy wanted forgotten. The queen had survived judgment, hostility, and years of being treated as a problem to manage. Now she believed the future was preparing to reduce her life beside the king to a chapter everyone wished to close. Catherine understood more than Camilla expected. She confessed that her own fear was entering a future reign already surrounded by resentment. The future queen could not bear the thought of William being forced to choose constantly between his wife and his father's widow. Every family gathering, every memorial, and every private decision could become another battle. She did not want victory over Camilla. She wanted freedom from a conflict that could poison the next reign before it began. Camilla then revealed how the document had reached her. An ambitious courtier had delivered the framework privately, insisting that the Wales household was preparing to remove her from influence. A courtier is a palace official who works close to senior members of the royal family. The queen now understood that the warning had been designed to provoke her into confronting Catherine. Catherine felt the shape of the betrayal at once. Someone had exploited both women's deepest fears and turned uncertainty into hostility. She promised that the source would be removed from transition planning and denied access to future confidential discussions. Camilla slid the document across the table. Catherine did not take it. Instead, she moved her chair closer and asked one quiet question. What would dignity look like to her personally? Their answer did not restore friendship, but it created a private agreement strong enough to survive what came next. Yet just as the two women reached a fragile understanding, the details of their first conversation escaped the palace, and Britain awoke to a royal conflict stripped of all privacy. By sunrise, a private wound had become a national spectacle. Broadcasters spoke of a battle between the present queen and the woman destined to follow her. Commentators dissected every phrase, while palace officials scrambled to determine who had betrayed the family. But beneath the noise, one image captured the country's attention. Catherine and Camilla arriving separately at the same royal engagement, both knowing millions were watching for anger in every glance. The leak moved faster than the palace could contain it. Television presenters repeated the most damaging lines, radio hosts debated the struggle for influence, and digital platforms turned one private exchange into thousands of public judgments. Newspaper editors rushed new editions into print before Charles's advisors could agree on a response. A rival court means a separate circle of loyalty forming around one royal figure, and officials feared the story made it appear that competing centers were growing around the king and William. Camilla felt humiliated by the suggestion that she was desperately clinging to power. The queen had spent years earning public acceptance, only to see herself described as an obstacle standing in Catherine's path. Every headline reduced her fear of being forgotten to a hunger for control. The wound was personal, because the public was now judging not only her authority, but the meaning of her entire life beside Charles. Catherine faced an equally harsh portrayal. Commentators presented her as a silent strategist, preparing to push Camilla aside before William even inherited the crown. The future queen knew that any angry response would strengthen that image. When the prince demanded a forceful denial, she urged restraint. Denying the meeting itself could destroy their credibility if another part of the conversation emerged. The security review then produced its first decisive finding. According to the written investigation, the leak had not come from either woman's closest staff. It traced back to the same ambitious courtier who had secretly delivered the transition framework to Camilla. The official had created the conflict, watched it grow, and then exposed it publicly. Charles reacted without hesitation. Once the king learned that the confrontation had been deliberately inflamed, he authorized the courtier's immediate removal from sensitive duties. The monarch understood that betrayal inside the household was more dangerous than disagreement between two women. A major newspaper appeared with the front-page words, "The Last Secret Talk," above photographs of Catherine and Camilla. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered with phones raised toward the gates, while broadcasters repeated the leaked exchange. At the engagement, Catherine paused beside Camilla. The queen then placed one deliberate hand against her arm. Neither spoke, but the gesture carried their answer. That brief gesture ended the public performance of division, but only the private verdict could reveal what the confrontation had truly changed inside the monarchy. The leaked conversation was brutal because it exposed more than rivalry. It revealed two women confronting the same institution from opposite ends of time. Camilla feared becoming irrelevant the moment Charles's reign ended. Catherine feared inheriting a monarchy weakened by unresolved loyalties. Neither fear was imaginary, and neither woman emerged entirely victorious. Their final agreement succeeded because it rejected both extremes. Camilla would not control the next reign, but she would not be stripped of dignity, history, or family. Charles retained full authority for the rest of his reign, but William's household gained clearly defined independence over future staffing, family strategy, and transition planning. A royal household is the team responsible for a senior royal's official duties, private schedule, and advisors. That separation mattered because the next reign could not begin with two competing groups trying to influence the same decisions. Camilla agreed that she would not seek an automatic place in the next sovereign's private councils. Those councils are confidential meetings where the monarch receives personal advice before major choices are made. The Queen accepted that her experience would be respected, but it would not give her permanent control once the crown passed to William. That decision ended the threat of rival centers of influence forming around the old and new reigns. Catherine also faced a difficult truth. Protecting William did not require humiliating the woman who had stood beside Charles. The future queen understood that strength without compassion could create the very bitterness she was trying to prevent. Camilla, in return, accepted that dignity could survive without control. Stepping away from future decisions did not mean her marriage, service, or place in the family would be erased. Charles permanently removed the courtier who had manipulated the conflict from all transition work. The king also ordered stricter controls over confidential documents, ensuring that private plans could no longer be used as weapons between royal households. Catherine and Camilla then approved a written understanding together. It guaranteed ceremonial respect for the queen, independent authority for the future king and queen, and no secret interference between the two households. In their final private exchange, Catherine returned the leaked framework. Camilla closed the folder, handed it back, and said, "Then let the future begin without making enemies of the past." The secret talk did not destroy the monarchy or create a permanent feud. It forced both women to confront fear before fear became sabotage. Catherine emerged ready to defend the future without cruelty. Camilla emerged willing to surrender influence without surrendering self-respect. The door that once closed on anger finally opened onto clarity. Catherine would guard the crown's future, Camilla would retain her dignity, and the monarchy would move forward without denying the people who had carried it to that moment. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.